process that we have tried to articulate and tried to visualize in a way that helps us plan our projects. I think what is important here is it's a more fluid process than a real step-by-step process that you can follow along. So we definitely have to decide on a project-per-project basis, like what phases do we include and how do we work in these phases. And what I will try to do is show with one example how we achieve to do this. These are just some areas where we do work beside our own production work. So we mostly work for clients, but on the other side we also do a few research projects or projects that are basically coming out of our own lab. And we help companies like plan their projects a little bit better. On the side, we write a blog. It's called datavisualization.ch. It's, as you might guess, about data visualization. This is what it looks like, and there are a ton of projects on there that we document that we find interesting and we find beneficial to the community, created by other creators, not just our own. What we also do is we, from time to time, talk a little bit about the process when we have just recently created a project, so just to help new starting out practitioners to get started in this field. So as mentioned, we don't see ourselves as a regular interaction design company, and what we mean by that is we think that we combine the principles of data visualization with the principles of interface design. This poses some questions, but on the other hand, it also opens up a whole range of possibilities. So what I will try to do, I will try to test you. So could you please, and scream out loud, the times the digit number 5 you see on the screen?
1.
4.
Even more?
That's 8.
Okay, you cheated. That's too many. No, so it's actually 6. And like this is a really, really basic principle for of visual perception. So just changing one little attribute, and as of now we just changed the brightness of the digits, makes it so much more easy to understand the information on the screen. The same counts for this map. In this map there are values plotted on the districts of France. And there is a place where the numbers are higher, and there is a place where numbers are lower. And it's really hard to encode it when you just look at it in this way. But when you use visual attributes to represent the same information, it's much more intuitive to understand it. So visual principles for us is really that you understand what's going on without knowing what's the underlying structure of it.
It is so cute. Oh my gosh.
It takes some time to understand it. All right, so I will show you a project that we recently published. It's called Ville Vivante. It was a project commissioned by the city of Geneva. It was a collaboration with the New Future Laboratory and the LIFT conference. And the data was provided by Swisscom, which is a Swiss telecommunications provider. The question that they asked was, how can we show the city of Geneva as a living and breathing place where people come together, interact with each other, and eventually part again? So this was the vision for them. What they tried to do is show this type of vibrating place based on mobile usage data. And we were like, well, data in its raw form is not really something that is elegant, not really something that is organic or feels as a living organism. So we asked the question, how can we breathe in some kind of elegance and some kind of charm into this pile of numbers? What we did in the first place, what we started to articulate these attributes that we think of when we think about organism and think about living structures. So we created a collection of visuals that we found for organisms, and these are on multiple scales. So like from micro scale up to macro scale, where organisms like flock as swarms, either fish or bird. And so this collection provided us with the behavioral, but also with the aesthetical patterns that we wanted to use to communicate or to give a feeling of living and breathing of data. So we distilled a few what we call visualization patterns out of this collection because we wanted to communicate the notion of growth, the notion of interaction, notion of dynamics, and ebb and flow. And then, as we have identified these patterns, we started to experiment with the code and with the data. And what you see here are just a few of the many, many more like errors that we ran across when we work with data. Because the process between an interface design where you decide or where you guide your decisions based on the user's context and the user's task, the user's capabilities, it's really when you work with visualizations that you need to work with the raw data, and you can't possibly predict what's in there. So what you do is you start plotting it out in 1,000 and more iterations and try to get a feeling and get an understanding for the stories that are embedded. After this process of experimenting with the code and coming up with different visualization ideas, we were able to really communicate the information that we found in the data on 2 different medias. And we decided to have one abstract but eye-catching projection, and we have a series of posters where we tell really specific stories about the data. And so the result really was, as I just said, this series of posters. And these posters go deep into the data and reveal stories about the city of Geneva. So this was an exhibition. It lasted over 2 weeks in the city of Geneva. It was a really good place, really nice size of the posters. And these posters went into some more detail about the information. So you could look at, this means 1 week of activity. So you could look at the changes of activity for all the days of the week and for the 24 hours of the day. Or you can have a look at the flux of people, so how people move into the city of Geneva or to the outside of, to the periphery. Another version was that we showed the movements between different districts of the city of Geneva. So all the bubbles are the districts of Geneva, and the arcs represent the amount of people that travel within these districts. And the last one is a representation of the collective activities of the whole city for all the different districts, combined and normalized for an average day. So these are the posters, but I think much more fun is the visualization itself. Does it work, the audio?
Did you plug it in?
think the ones who are a bit familiar with data visualization on a map have discovered that this probably can't be like human behavior on the map, because like you don't have people traveling across the sea just like by walking there. So we need to be clear that this was a more artistic interpretation of the data. There was some distortion involved, and if we would have just plotted the information, there would be straight lines between point A and point B, so from where to where do people walk. But what we tried to do is again like put in these behaviors that we see when organisms flock together. So a person would walk from A to B, would cross person C, and then be grouped together with that person, and then eventually spread again to reach the ultimate goal. So it's definitely a less precise visualization, so a more engaging, a little bit more exciting visualization than what would help you understand the data better just by looking at it. But the decision came because we really knew that the passerbyers, so the people who want to go to the station, who want to go to the shopping mall or whatever, they don't have the time to really investigate this visualization. What they have the time to is like have a quick look at it, get interested in it, and then find their answers to their questions that they might have around the city of Geneva in the posters. And so, with that, I would like to say thank you. If there are questions.
How did you guys, what tools did you guys use to generate, you know, the movie or the posters?
So, the animation that you just saw was all built in processing. So it was just a mapping library that we used in processing, and then just there was some data refinement involved in the first place that we did with Ruby, but then used the data rawly
Just feed it in.
to create it in processing. And actually, the movie was created using or exporting each frame of the animation from processing and then putting it back together. And for the posters, it was mostly D3 actually to generate the forms that we would then export as SVG, reopen in Illustrator, and just did some final touches.
How long did that project take in total?
That project was, we started working on it in early December last year, and was published in mid-February this year, so 2.5 months roughly.
How long do you guys like give to exploring? Like, is there a certain amount of time that you work with just like experimenting in general?
Yeah, I mean, for this project, we really, like, exploring was, I would say 2 to 3 weeks. But we were lucky enough to be able to like dedicate one person to it, because we, at the time, we worked on multiple projects at the same time. So somebody was free enough to get started with the exploration phase already, and like he could invest 2 or 3 weeks. Then experimenting is something basically that happens throughout the project. So like really we would add in finishing touches a few days before the launch of the exhibition, just because we knew like the steps that it would take us to put the movie together at the end, but wanted to like really focus on the little details that add so much value to a visualization. Right. So I think the initial state was ready a few weeks after we started working on it, but then like it's the real details that make all the difference.
Nice.
Do you guys ever work on projects that are meant to be more persistent and long-standing? Like that was a 2-week like exhibition, right?
Yeah.
And so you have people maybe see it once, maybe twice, and then go to that area. As opposed to something like what we're trying to do with LinkedIn is put some of these data visualizations on our site, but the hope is that people are actually coming to the site ideally like every day. So I'm kind of wondering if there's any tips or insights that you have about how to build data visualizations for things that people are going to come back to day after day after day.
Yeah, definitely. So a project like this is really an exception for us, because most of the time we work on interfaces and visualizations that are used by real users every day. So, like one example could be a personal financial application. It's a web application in a similar direction as Mint, comes out of the United States that we work on. And there we really, because they do a combination between, classical interface design and visualizations that show you more visually a representation of your financial goals and your financial progress and everything like that. And so there of course there are so many more questions than what we are confronted with here. Like there we need to include user feedback, we need to include user research that has been done up front. It's also that we work more iteratively there, so that we would come up with a solution that just focuses on, or just uses best practices and heuristics to come up with the first solution, roll it out to a subset of users and then test it with them, like if this works for them or if it doesn't. And we were not in the lucky position to be able to talk directly to the users themselves. I think a lot of you are, so this is an awesome opportunity, I think, to get better understanding. There was some kind of disconnect because we are located in Switzerland, and of course the user research team is based here in the United States. So we always get the feedback a little bit delayed, and then needed to make refinements based on what has already been documented without being able to access them directly. So I think accessing the user and just do what you would normally do with any other interface is definitely recommended for visualizations as well.
Other things, like you said, like goals, so meeting against goals, and I forget what the other one was that you said, but both of those, they seem very time-based. So in order to keep things fresh, right, one way to do that is things are changing over time, so you're always showing like a time variant. So are there other things to, any other
non-time
But yeah, other kinds of data you're working with? I was curious about that, like if once you work with the data, did it open up new possibilities you hadn't considered, or did it close down things you thought you might be able to do once you started working with the real data? Did it change your original ideas once you?
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. And I think that's Peter's strongest argument that he makes throughout all of our processes. So really, like working with the data does and also should influence the outcome, because you can't possibly predict how the raw data will behave when you put it in form. So creating data visualizations is it's not a process from point A to point B. It's more, you learn so much about the data doing data visualizations. So the process of working on the visualization itself informs you so much about the data itself. So you get you understand it much better. And you are then able to switch the direction of what the ultimate visualization should be based on that you understood this data now much better. So it's always a balance between analysis and creation, and then again analysis and then again creation. So this is an ongoing process how we see it or how we experience it.
Maybe one more point about the interface. The project Benjamin mentioned the initial setup was that we would do a visualization with such and such dimensions that would be planted into their website, their planner, and we never saw the actual website. And this was a very bad idea. And we told them, and it was hard to finally get access to the website. And it showed that it didn't really work well to have a visualization in a tiny window that is very disconnected from the rest of the page. And there we try to split it up and put it in different places on the page to integrate it better.
This is a financial company?
Yeah.
I used to work in financial companies, so they don't, because you said they won't let you see it, so I'm guessing it's private data.